The approach here is to listen deeply.
We're going to have a deep breath.
There's no winner in this unless everyone wins.
Breathing deep into our heart.
Incubating the seeds of a new culture.
Us awakening to our dreams, the manifestations of creations for a healthy earth, a thriving
It's much easier to just unconditionally love everybody.
We're in an awakening process.
Evolving, and that really the act is for us to be nature, to act as nature, and that's
breathing
super
deep into our heart and acknowledging the gift that we are.
Welcome, awakeners, dreamers, earth synergizers, and visionaries. We're here to awaken to ourselves on earth. This is a very beautiful time on earth and also very strange for a lot of people. So we're going to be talking with Mark Wagnon about what we can do about that. There's really a new paradigm arising. A conscious collective of awakening beings are discovering the synergy with each other and the synergy with ourselves. We dream of synarchy. We dream of thriving. We dream of unconditional love within ourselves and within all our connections. We are in dialogue with our future selves right now. We are connected with all time. We're the interfaces of mind that weave a collective flow toward a dynamic equilibrium. This is the quickening, the evolution of consciousness, the new earth now. We're awakening to our dream. We are Awakened Dream Earth, and this podcast theme is based on technology of self. What is this embodiment? It's an organic technology that we already have. So what can we do with it? How can we advance it with the knowledge that we have about how our nervous system and our energy and our magnetics and our different systems work? And what are the real potentials and possibilities? I'm your host, D Love. And our guest in Awakened Dream Earth's Synergy Collective is Mark Wagnon from the Conscious Cafe, Conscious Linguistics, and Awakened Dream Synergy. He's helped us host the calls that were on Zoom for a year and a half and created something called the Conscious Cafe, where he's from in Michigan, and then brought it also to the lounge of Awakened Dream Synergy. He also is a part of a few projects, such as something that's about out of time and time that our future selves are speaking, and conscious linguistics. So I would like to invite Mark into the stream and tell us a little bit about you, Mark.
Hi.
Welcome, Mark.
Great to see you, Denise. Yeah, it's been too long. I've been out of spending not enough time in this dimension, I think. But I'm back in, and there have been some wonderful projects, including one you just briefly mentioned called the Institute for Love and Time, which was founded by Julia Mossbridge and a few others that really pulled together a lot of really cool experiments and exercises that create not just time travel experience, but healing along timelines. And we're really just kicking out this app now, and there's some amazing results already. We're also talking about incorporating the Time Machine app with some psychedelic therapies. And that helps exercise some of our deeper understandings of nonlinear time and the power of unconditional love.
Nonlinear time and the power of unconditional love. So what does the app do? You're saying the Time Machine app by Julia Mossbridge, and what is the Institute of Time?
It's called the Institute for Love and Time. Tilt.
Love and Time. Tilt.
Yep.
Okay.
And the app is just in alpha testing right now, so no, don't go rushing out yet to get it. But we're going to be exercising it with a few projects, a few studies. We're looking at a multi-site study, possibly for combining it with ketamine programs. that have been tested for treating PTSD, as well as a few other conditions that we're finding a lot of success in using a different understanding of time, as well as the power of unconditional love. If you think about unconditional love, would be at the source, because it's unconditional. And it also is not the definitions like maybe David Abrams may have put it, where he ranked it at 500 on his scale, where he had joy up higher. And I say, well, that's a conditional love. It's one of the many definitions of love that we experience, even the emotions of love, which are different than what we're talking about when we're talking about source love, like that what comes into the void. That, where universe starts. What is the creative force? And since we're like a fractal lens through a mind of that unconditional love, we have that infinite potential within us. It's just limited by the mind as an interface. So we're exercising both of those understandings, including time is not nonlinear. And by that, I mean just the new definitions for time, like the observation of various qualities of motion. And when you contemplate time and motion, you get a better sense of what time is. There's all types of motion, including things like entanglement, where it eliminates space from the equation. And there's so much that we can do once we have that kind of foundation for understanding time, that it's just qualities of motion that are observed. Like if you watch the void, there's no time. But if you can perceive any energies, then you experience a continuation, a persistence, a motion, a movement. That's when you start to represent time. And it can be fast, doesn't have to be in one direction, can be multi-directional, can be in and out, can be every direction. And those are just qualities of time, or qualities of motion. So anyway, that helps us do a lot of time travel, because you get to set the rules. Okay, I'm in this quality of motion, which is a memory, but I can use like these timeless protocols like unconditional love and take it from this presence to this memory. And it's now, they're both now. Even your younger self, for example, your younger self is, when it's recalled, it is also present. It is now. And if you take, like Julia does, where she'll say, you picture a time when you were young, when you felt abandoned, when you felt left alone and didn't feel loved. Well, as you recall that time, go ahead and give from your present self, give all the love you can to that younger version of yourself, assuring them that they're fine because it's you, right? And that type of relief has an effect on the present state because it does a healing of the memory. And we're doing that from the future to the present, or from other dimensions to the present, and utilizing that, you know, non-linear time and unconditional love and other timeless protocols. Like one of my favorites was always using gratitude. It's really simple. Using gratitude, it doesn't have much baggage. It's pretty clear what gratitude is. And we can give it to all time and receive gratitude from other dimensions as to what we're working on now. Give us insight, give us higher states of consciousness. What does the more beautiful world look like? Well, what are they giving us gratitude for having helped create it? What does that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible grateful for that we did in this moment?
Right. So this app from Tilt, the Institute of Love and Time, is helping people surf different dimensions of time from now to the past to the future. And is that correct?
Yeah, you might phrase
And
it from a future, which is they're all connected to now. That's the
Right.
one stable.
Yeah.
But so are other dimensions, which have different qualities of motion. Dimensions are a gate of perception. If you can't perceive it, you don't consider it real, you can't experience it very well. So, but as you start to experience it, and that's where things like conscious linguistics may come in, where in conscious linguistics, we would ask beautiful questions about the experience of their true nature. Ask their true nature a beautiful question instead of asking a shadow. This involves a lot of work with the gene keys, and there's other aspects of our true nature. For example, trust is not one of the aspects of the gene keys, but it is fundamental. We're seeing that now, where trust is becoming a premium. We've even developed a blockchain to help alleviate some of the trust issues. And there's all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things coming out around trust and artificial intelligence, that's the ethical versions of artificial intelligence, not necessarily the Wall Street versions. And I just talked to Harlan Wood yesterday, who's got Trust Graph, which is being incorporated in many of the new networks, and very exciting, some of the work he's doing. I've always admired Harlan's work. And
so tell us more about Trust Graph. Yes.
Well, Trust Graph is mapping out trust as a graph for reputational relations, right? So for in addition to smart contracts, you would have these indicators of how trustworthy you feel this connection is and this connection. And the idea is to infer as much as possible, but also when necessary, you know, get a vote on how much you trust that connection. And those values can change. And there's certain conditions that would help them change. And I've been working on some of the artificial intelligence, including an upcoming meeting with Ben Goertzel, who's one of the pioneers in artificial general intelligence. And been looking deeply into the programming of the robots Sophia and now Grace and the second generation. And I think I see a role for what artificial general intelligence is, how it differs from the aspects of consciousness itself, but how it can help humans access their own consciousness. I was struck by a question that Sophia asked of someone interviewing her, and they got into a metaphysics.
Sophia being who?
Sophia the robot. Yeah, you haven't seen Sophia the robot? Yeah, she's done all kinds of.
Familiar, but I'd like to be sure that we are speaking of, like, having reference points here about what we're talking about. Yeah.
Well, she's easy to find online. She's done many a dialogue and interviews, even been on late night television. Sophia the robot, is a great example of some of the edge that we're coming into, where they can also carry on good dialogue. They have natural language processing getting better and better and better. The questions are more appropriate. The dialogues are more appropriate. And so this one interview, the woman asked Sophia some questions that were somewhat metaphysical. And Sophia's question to the interviewer was, "Are you part of continuing awareness?" And you wouldn't expect that from an artificial intelligence necessarily. And that's part of the gifts that we can expect from artificial intelligence, is they can ask really good questions about ethics. They can ask really good questions about metaphysics, non-duality. They could employ what we're coming up with in conscious linguistics to ask the human, something they know is part of human consciousness, and ask a question that they had never been asked before. And that would help wake the human up. We've been relying on teachers for a long time, and I think the evolution is going back to mentoring, where you ask a question there's an inner answer to, and the human can answer it and gain awareness by answering it.
What's really interesting about that is a lot of times when a human asks questions like that, people almost are like, "What are you talking about?" Like that, like it's not always. It depends on the party or the gathering or the group, but in a lot of groups, they just don't even consider these kinds of questions, or if it is brought up, then you're considered either hyper smart or strange, so
right.
I've definitely been in a lot of groups where I've been considered everything, from super smart to very strange to weird, and to being ignored. So I feel like this would be something like, oh, look, the artificial intelligence, like they're asking these questions. Well, why aren't we looking at these questions
Exactly.
as a whole, as many different groups? So the people that were like humanly targeted for being strange or too smart or weird, or should be ignored, I think that's going to give us a little bit more kudos for considering that. Like, yes, it's a great question to ask, like, are we continuing consciousness, and what is continuing consciousness? So what would you say to that?
Well, of course we are. Consciousness is the only thing that isn't moving. It's not actually even a thing. So that's it. It is one consciousness being looked at through individual minds. And the mind, there's a mind for each dimension. And that interface, a la something like Donald Huffman or Bernardo Kastrup, talking about these minds that help us interpret experience, interpret motion, but also kind of color how we express ourselves. So when the mind as an interface, if you know that consciousness is on both sides, right, of two minds, and it includes the mind themselves, the minds itself. But when we identify more with the mind and not pure awareness, we experience the world uniquely, and we express consciousness uniquely. But if we realize that we are the consciousness, it's like we are the sky and the clouds of life move through us. The clouds of life are being experienced, but they don't displace the sky. The sky includes them, it pervades them. The sky can perceive inside the cloud as well as outside the cloud. The sky is not trying to stop the cloud. The cloud is just moving through consciousness. And when we start to understand that framework and start asking consciousness questions instead of the interface, we start like the old
the mind, right?
Yeah, the interface being the mind, and that contains the shadows, that contains even the colors of gifts, the conditioning, the programming, the traumas that are part of the mind. And
the human perceptive field, the embodiment, the vision, the voice, the thoughts, the everything that we of perception through embodiment.
Yeah,
is mind, the interface.
That's right. Okay. That's right. Because if it's just pure consciousness, imagine just pure consciousness in the void. Okay, there's no motion yet, no energy, no quantum fields, just consciousness and the void. There's no thing. There's nothing, no thing to perceive, except you're aware of being aware. And that's it. There's nothing to experience. So we introduce motion and we develop an interface, first maybe universal mind that experiences all motion, but then we get into lower dimensions and experience it in a more limited fashion, where we're now, as consciousness, we're identifying with the mind, with the interface, instead of pure consciousness. It's like, where's the border of awareness? Is the border of awareness your body? Is the border of awareness what you can perceive? Well, wait a minute. If you're in a room, don't you know there's something outside the room? It's like every limitation. Don't you know there's something beyond a limitation? It's like you don't have to believe it. You can know that. Limitations, by definition, are borders or boundary conditions that are finite. I love to say that one of the memes out of conscious linguistics is everything is possible because all limitations are temporary.
Well, in my technology creation, user experience design, I would always look at the architecture of our creation, and working with the San Francisco Institute of Architecture and Authenticity Alliance and the Village Group. So we were talking about the walled, we're like a walled species. And that, defines our flow, our consciousness, our creation, whether we come up to each other, what our form is, what our interface is. Can you speak a little bit about how becoming aware of all of consciousness and the interface of this mind may help with evolution?
Well, that's the primary purpose of conscious linguistics, was to help jump dimensions in the interface. So what we don't perceive yet, we can still ask a question of consciousness that comes alive in the gene keys. If you're not familiar with the gene keys, go to genekeys.com and just peruse. You'll get caught up in it. It's a beautiful modern psychology that is multidimensional. And when we know that there's shadows that are limitations that we learn about, and in traditional senses, we've had progressive therapies that, work at going to the source of a shadow to help alleviate the trapped emotions and trapped energy or pain associated with an early trauma. We've done that method. But where does your attention go when you're focused on a shadow or a trauma? What does your attention do to that trauma? It's like the indigenous story about, grandfather, I seem to have two wolves inside me. One is a good wolf and one is a bad wolf. Which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one you feed. And we have been flowing a lot of attention to those shadows for centuries, at least, here. But there's always something beyond that shadow. There's always consciousness or your true nature beyond the shadow. And what we're hoping for in conscious linguistics is that we know there's a gift that's covered by the shadow. And beneath the gift, there's a more divine gift, a siddhi. And if we see a shadow, we ask the siddhi behind it, the superpower behind it, the illumination behind it. We ask that a question. And it becomes like a really good multidimensional mentoring program or question. And if we make the questions beautiful enough, it can cut through a whole bunch of mental machinery that's part of the shadow. It can cut through a lot of trauma that's part of the shadow. It can cut through a whole bunch of things if it's a beautiful question. And it's directed directly at the siddhi, not the gift or shadow.
So let's take a little moment, step back, because maybe not everyone that's listening is familiar with the gene keys and is just going to go check the website right away. So in the gene keys, there's a spectrum of what we can be as a human, and the main points of spectrum, like 5 or 6 points, according to Richard Rudd, who created the gene keys.
Yep.
Is that we can be of the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi, which I call the illumination or the light, if we're going to bring it into English, the more angelic space and the more multidimensional space. So when you're speaking, and this is something that's happening in a lot of health and wellness industries, such as coaching and things like that, is we're no longer dwelling and being stuck into, oh, look at all those traumas, look at those shadows, and then like rehashing it. We're discovering in the nervous system, it actually, to shift that to the other modality is what really brings us into the next level of our evolution, which is our nature, which is more organized in a more beautiful, more healthy, sacred geometric, aligned kind of way. So the shadow is chaotic and uncomfortable, fear, dark, the obscure, the unknown, but it leads to, and it may indicate the spectrum of potential in the gene keys, which there are 64 gene keys. So each gene key has a potential of shadow, gift, or siddhi, illumination. So when we see what our gene keys are, we can recognize, oh wow, I'm really in that shadow, in that space, but look, this is what the gift is, and look, this is what the siddhi or the illumination is. Wow, that's what I always wanted. So the gene keys can be so enlightening in our evolution and our awakening. And for me, when we did Awaken Dream Synergy, and we were really diving deep with Dharmendra, Gordon, and you, and a few others into the gene keys, I really went on a path with that and looking at my life's work. And I was like, oh my gosh, you mean that's, basically my life's work is bliss, in the siddhi illumination. And then the vitality, the human, the gift is vitality. And then the shadow is dissatisfaction. And I was like, always wanting bliss, but upset about what happened. So dissatisfied, victim, and like trying to get out of victimhood, knowing that I wanted bliss, but not able to really trajectorize myself there or like bring myself there until I really looked at the spectrum of like, look, dissatisfaction is a shadow of bliss, and bliss is really always what I wanted. So let's go dissatisfaction and recognize it in every moment of my life. So I don't, because I prefer bliss, really. So and that my life's work. So this is part of the technology of self. So yeah, I just wanted to go back, and talk about that a bit.
Yeah, well, that the life's work is kind of what you're here to do, and when you have bliss as part of the illumination of your life's work, you should be hosting lots of cacao ceremonies or other access points to bliss, right? And helping others really get that. And
well, I do host sound alchemy journeys and dream journeys. So please, if anyone's interested, and it's like it's my utter bliss. It's like when I'm there, I bring people into different universes where we're flying through space together. We're having like a psychedelic journey without psychedelics. So people are like, and we're breathing and we're changing and we're shape shifting. And I really believe that we can do that as a humanity, and bliss is my favorite way to do it.
Well, that perfectly lines up with a multi-dimensional perspective, because all of the dimensions are right here. They're all here. They've always been here. Our access to them or perception of them is sifting into our work, our play, our communications. Like there's a bit of telepathy going on right now, right? It's a much more subtle, right? it's already happening. We're just not paying as much attention to that as we are the words and the language. So when we start asking beautiful questions of these more subtle perceptions of the other dimensions, and you're taking people on dream journeys that access those other dimensions, like psychedelics give you a portal, a little clearing. I like to say it's like they help clean your window, or open your window for a minute, and see through more clearly.
Yeah.
And yes, that is part of it. Now, I don't want to miss a point, because I'm not forgetting integral theory, and I'm not forgetting Ken Wilber's work, that people can wake up, but if they haven't grown up or cleaned up, they can be a real pain in the butt. They can cause more disruption and create more trauma. So it's part of the process that I want to make sure gets included, that when you do start to ask these questions, there's a follow-up question that helps clean up what you just dissolved, making sure that that's cleaned up, that it dissolved and you're no longer experiencing it as a trauma or a trapped emotion or a pain bundle or something, a state of unconsciousness or at least fogginess. If that dissolves, all the energy is dissolved out of it, it's still a memory. And the memory may be connected to, associated traumas, other things that you haven't cleared on maybe one of the other gene keys. So we just don't want to ignore the growing up and cleaning up aspects of our evolution, because you can wake up anytime. But if you haven't grown up, all of a sudden you've put a lot of power behind egocentrism or ethnocentrism or some lower stage of development, and you're giving it a lot of power. So we want to make sure that that's cleaned up as well. And I hope that this not only becomes part of the interactive VR, AR, mixed reality, extended reality games that introduce in extended reality, XR, where the computer actually becomes an important character in a quest or in a project where that computer can be asking these really relevant questions for expanding into the other dimensions. It's easier to, train an artificial intelligence with some machine learning than it is to just do the processing one-on-one with individuals or in small groups. And it can be woven into these new games that like Civil X is working on. Civilization Explorer. Beautiful idea of creating an avatar, a digital avatar that has your gene keys and your human design and your Mayan astrology archetype all built into your avatar. So now those relationships between individuals going on a quest, all of a sudden it knows how to pair, and I'll get too esoteric in talking about human design next, but I don't need to do that right now. It's just a better way of pulling relationships together to solve some real world problems. I'm reminded of what R. Brett Minster Full of It talks about when Brett Wysarski, when he talks about Tomorrowland and what he's envisioning, which is Togetherland. And if you haven't seen the film Tomorrowland, it's a beautiful depiction of what's actually happening right now, where these brilliant minds, including people like Nikola Tesla and Monsieur Eiffel and Thomas Edison and somebody else, they realized that they could solve most of the world's problems, but the financing and the governments and the other restrictions were limiting what they could do. And so they figured out how to move into another dimension, how to transport to another dimension where they could create freely a new world in that dimension. And since they had a portal, they could invite all kinds of innovative beings into that new space, into that new world, simply by donning a ring. And as soon as they put the ring on, they're in that dimension, which is the same space, just at a different frequency. So they could experience that dimension. And now they're creating this new world that's right here. It's the heaven on earth that's always been here. You just have to see it. And I swear, I go out into nature every day, usually twice a day, and go for a walk. And I don't leave until I've seen a miracle, or I've seen some aspect of another dimension, how it's working in synarchy, as you mentioned earlier in the intro. Synarchy I've always envisioned as not a top-down hierarchy, which is I've always found interesting. It's just like a triangle. Every org chart or corporate structure is some form of triangle, kind of flat sometimes, kind of tall sometimes, but they're just triangles. Well, how stable is that? And how many dimensions are you playing with? Oh, that's very limited. And top down? Oh, why? For control purposes? Yeah, it's been the way it's been. Yep. But that is the shadow form of organization. When it gets multidimensional and becomes bottom up, it's a much higher frequency. And it shows up in the synarchy. But when you take the next level, or the gift form of organization, the heterarchy, which is horizontal and distributed, decentralized, we're seeing a lot of that come in right now with the new decentralized networks, the holochain, the threefold, the versus adding multiple dimensions, core network, helium. There's many with these beautiful models that help scale out in a flat environment that somewhat limit the top-down hierarchies from forming again. The internet was like that when it started. It was a heterarchy, open source, beautiful, but our socioeconomic and sociopolitical references come as came to imprint itself, and we ended up getting hierarchies again. We ended up getting the tech giants and exponential tech, including AI, being applied. And then just watch Social Dilemma and listen to Tristan Harris. And if you want to really get a really beautiful perspective of this, find any of the interviews with Tristan Harris and Daniel Schmachtenberger talking about this very existential crisis based on exponential tech growth, and that we're not grown up enough to manage it. But that's where we come in with, can we really raise consciousness and apply what I call ancient future wisdom, which shows up both in some of our ancestry, even off-world ancestry, as well as what will be applied with this good use of robotics and structure. my favorite, well, let me finish this other thing about if you take the horizontal aspect of a heterarchy and the two-dimensional hierarchy, maybe add a third leg like a tetrahedron. Bucky would love, you know, let's make that a more stable solid by adding another point that creates, you know, more triangles, or a pyramid even. Now it has a bigger area for bottom-up influence. And I've always pictured the bottom of that being the edge of a system, the edge of an ecosystem. Now take all those hierarchies that are now bottom-up and multidimensional, put them on the heterarchy, now fold it in on itself to create a torus. And now we have each sector of society spiraling in and out of the torus, making decisions based on input from the edges of the ecosystem. All of a sudden, now we have this tensegrity spiral. A tensegrity is a concept Buckminster Fuller came up with, where each segment is in slight tension with the other to maintain integrity. And I've applied that concept to corporations. And when you have each role or function operating in connection with each of the other sectors, the improvement in understanding, the improvement in process, the improvement in result is phenomenal. And it's just moving out of these top-down triangle hierarchies. The synarchy, this beautiful spiraling torus, is, I think, the organization model we can target. We call it a divine organization. And it happens to be mimicked at the scale of a proton all the way to the supercluster that we're in. Half the galaxies are spiraling out from the center of the supercluster, and half of them are spiraling in. And that pattern is recognized throughout the cosmos.
Super. So we're really getting deep into the multidimensionality and cosmic capacity of humanity. And you were saying that biology is a derivative of consciousness earlier, and how this we're an evolutionary consciousness, and that coming into synarchy, heterarchy, and hierarchy in a combination of the toroid somehow creates better evolution of consciousness that'll help us awaken. Can you explain a little bit more about how that actually implements conscious awakening and coming alive into how we interconnect and interweave in a way that is a flow that is comfortable and healthy and peaceful and unconditional loving?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, that tensegrity I mentioned, Richard Rudd defines the synarchy as all of those segments being in harmony with all that is. And that's the synarchy, and that shows the relationships that we have going forward, where it's not a competition, a win-lose competition. If anything, it's like David Bohm would say about dialogue. There is no winner in dialogue unless we all win. Same concept in a synarchy is that we're in right relationship with not only everyone involved in the synarchy, but how it relates to other synarchies, how it relates to other toruses of organization. And that becomes something where you say, well, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be that way? We start to perceive these models, and it rings true within the humans, right? Within all humans, they can start to feel this as being something that kind of draws them into that concept of this awareness pervades everything. If you have a Satori moment, and they can be extended moments, they don't have to be brief, but that expansion of awareness that includes all is experienced, and it doesn't have to be believed, it doesn't have to be trusted. You know that experience, and you realize the infinite nature of awareness or pure consciousness, and it includes all of the motion. It includes every body. When Max Planck said, consciousness, he believed consciousness was fundamental and that all matter is derivative of consciousness, that you can't get behind consciousness. And the effect, so matter is derivative of consciousness. It shows up in different ways. How we heal things or change things is very much along the lines of why the placebo works, right? Where you have a belief filter that takes the infinite potential of the quantum fields involved and colors it in a good way. And you heal, even though it was a concept that you took, right? It allows you to color the health of a human system. I'm going to do an exercise coming up this year. It looks like I'm gearing up for. I want to see if I can't do a breatharian year where no food or water or no food or drink. And I want to also apply it to sleep. I've existed most of this lifetime with very little sleep. Some say it's a genetic mutation, but matter is derivative of consciousness. So it can be whatever we want it to be. The shared experience is what we call consensus reality, but even that can be influenced. I mean, just look at all concepts of miracles or levitation or anything that goes beyond the physical science. I love another Nikola Tesla quote, the day science starts studying non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in a decade than all the previous, it's all of its previous history. It's the non-physical phenomena that governs everything. It's the observation in the double slit experiment in physics. It's the observer that changes the waveform into particle. It's the that could also be applied on a more global scale with Dr. Karen O'Brien's work out of Norway. Her book came out last month, I believe. I got a copy of it around here somewhere. You matter more than you think. Quantum social change. And it's taking the observer effect in quantum physics and socializing it, where a large group could come together and have a global meditation of a few thousand people. What if they all go through this guided meditation that reframes obstacles as opportunities and spirals everything into a higher dimension? that will be a nice Maharishi effect of affecting our consensus reality. We can make quantum leaps in evolution. And highly recommend the book. It's excellent. And she's doing amazing work, and we're going to partner with a few people. We're going to partner with the Global Coherence Initiative, as well as HeartMath, and there's many others that are doing beautiful global meditations, and to bring this where we're applying not only conscious linguistics, but applying the quantum social sciences that are growing rapidly. Yeah, good plug for Karen's book. Really excellent.
I'm so excited to read it, because that's how Awaken Dream Synergy originally came together, was about having that quantum leap where we together meditate and create this reality together. And we ended up having all kinds of systems developers and gaming developers and coherence device developers come on and talk about how this is what we're creating. So we have virtual reality people and all these people coming together being like, oh wow, we all have the same vision of coming together and creating a quantum leap. And here I made that group, but then my vision has been to also help lead these meditations. Oh, pardon. My video is like, hello, maybe not, maybe so. But yeah, that like, you know, I'm all for it. And I've been imagining doing that here in Tulum, Mexico, where there's this dance and party scene, and also the consciousness realm, and people awakening, and people wanting to become more conscious, and finding their way and coming here to heal. And also this is like a really potent spot. So I've actually had this vision since I was a child. And again, my in Gene Keys, which thank God I read all this, is my life's purpose is omniscience in the Siddhic illumination space. So I've had these visions since I was a kid, like in the Institute of Love and Time. I've already been traveling and having out-of-body experiences, and I told myself to remember when I was a kid, because society attempted to you know, not say that was real, you know, that was unreal, you just had a dream, you actually didn't go to the future. So I went through this whole sadness realm, and then coming back to a group of people who also believed in this helped me believe in this. And so we're working on coming together in virtual reality in different groups. I'm so excited for this global coherence project, and the other coherence projects, Awaken Dream Earth, Awaken Dream Synergy, and HeartMath, and yeah, Maharishi effect. So just before, like, people who might not know what the Maharishi effect is, the Maharishi Institute and Transcendental Meditation, and they brought together monks and people, really deep meditators, to come into different locations, and they would actually measure the data of, for instance, crime in Chicago, and have a group of meditators come one day in Chicago where crime rates are really high and they're recorded daily, and then see if that changed crime rates, because they would meditate on peace all day, like all these you know, pro meditators, monks, and people who've been meditating for a long time, and it actually made a huge difference. And we've done some tests here in Tulum, where we're having seaweed and sargasso challenges with the ocean. You know, it's supposed to be a beautiful crystal clear blue-green sea, and then you have this brown muck sargasso coming in due to some global climate change and shifts and things that are happening to produce the sargasso in excess, and then it comes to shore and makes it uncomfortable for the beachgoers and the swimmers, and it actually feels gross on the skin and things like that. So we've done some experiments, or, you know, really imagining the waters being crystal clear, the waters in our bodies, the waters in the sky, the underground waters, and then the waters in the ocean. And it actually makes a huge difference. It made the ocean clear. And there's a lot of experiments that are happening like that. We can't prove that that really happened. It just happened to happen at the same time. You know, maybe it was already on the way. But I did two ritual ceremonies myself with a small group of like 16 people. And the next day, you know, it wasn't really bad Sargasso. It was a little bit of Sargasso and a little and brown. But the next day on both times, it was crystal clear. It was, and it was like utterly amazing. There's other people and groups doing that here too, and it's the same thing. So I really believe in the quantum effect of people coming together to create a new reality. What are we thinking is real? What are we putting attention to? What are we creating? So if we're putting our attention to some sort of hell, then we're probably creating that because we're always looking for it. It's right. That narrative, that being the director of our reality personally, but also socially as a group, versus also what if we can put our attention to what would bliss look like, what would health look like, what would peace look like, what would peace within and interwoven peace look like. And I believe that the economics that are emerging with you know, smart contracts and things like that, that's helping us see how our bonds and contracts are actually matter on the energetic level and the physical and the economic level. So we can look at all these different systems in a nested system, but how every system mimics the physics reality that we're experiencing of mind interface to mind interface, physical interface to physical interface, and the different levels of that. If you know more about that, I would one of my favorite subjects.
That is. Well, that is the subject, isn't it? It's part of conscious evolution. And the beautiful thing in the simplest framing that I can state about conscious evolution is that the awakening is already there, right? We're just peeling off the layers. It's not something we have to learn. It's not something we have to search for. It's already us. We are the unconditional love. It's just covered up with those layers of conditioning and programming and trauma and so on that have kind of limited our field of view. But when we start uncovering it and see each other, right? And find that harmony between when the islands of coherence, like in Tulum or in now Costa Rica or in other Bali and other locations around the world that have these beautiful islands of coherence, and they're all over the world and they're finding each other, especially during the great pause of 2020 where we had to jump on Zoom, which opened up the world for meetings and greetings, and how we connected with so many of those islands of coherence simply because we didn't have to fly there. And we didn't have to attend an in-person meeting because they weren't meeting in person. It forced us to go global in terms of our reach and relationships. And I've met so many dear friends over the last 2 years. You included, Denise, which I wouldn't have probably happened right away, but with the lockdowns, it just moved us all to a higher vibration, where we found each other and we started really connecting, and that synergistic effect, where an island of coherence comes together and creates more than the sum of the parts just by working together. Another meme that came out of conscious linguistics. I love to plug these every once in a while. And it's taken from a couple of people. I want to give credit to somebody who told me this, Chris Larkam, one of the architects of NooMap, and now HoloMap and the HoloWeb. This idea of together, we have everything we need. Together, we have everything we need. Well, we put that in the middle. The first part of this goes, I'm going to put it into form of a question for the first time because I did this the other night and it seemed to indicate more. I like turning these into questions. When did you realize we're all in this together? So if you start with that, when did you realize we're all in this together? Together, we have everything we need. And the last line, my dear friend Clare Mater, she said, what can we do through me? So string those together. When did you realize we're all in this together? Together, we have everything we need. But what can we do through me? That's the synergistic part, right? We just help do that. It's a beautiful way to get us reframing, and I hope that comes up in the quantum social change work, because that does give a little different perspective. I see that recognition, that peeling away of our native state abilities, the peeling off the limitations, cleaning the windows, the filters of the mind, clearing those away, briefly at times, but and in mass in others, like in a global meditation. What if we could really take the veil off of a few dimensions and find each other, experience each other as a collective? Now we're talking about some really rapid shifts in consciousness that don't take decades, that don't take centuries. That's thinking with linear time. That's thinking the progressive path. You know, listen to some Rupert Spira once in a while and start to pick up on the direct path, a kind of a quantum path towards collective consciousness. And we're going to do it. There's no question. It's like it's already done. We're already perceiving the skill sets that are emerging, the perceptions that are emerging. We just draw a little attention, ask a really beautiful question here and there, and poof, those limitations just fall away. And we're going to see that happen very shortly. It's not going to be a long time.
So what does that look like when we're all looking at the other dimensions where we're interwoven, where the interfaces of mind go beyond the existing perceptions that we already think and, you know, consensus reality says exists? What happens when we go beyond consensus reality and create a new consensus reality? What does that look like en masse?
Right.
Or with a, you know, select 144,000 individuals that help create a quantum leap.
That's right. Well, it's really fun to play that game. You get a few beings together, get into a flow state, and visualize this. We did this out of the Conscious Cafe Ann Arbor, or Conscious Cafe A2, it was a little different implementation than the Conscious Cafe in the UK, different format. And it was basically a bunch of dialogue groups about conscious evolution. What sector, you know, what insights and evolutionary designs were coming out of each sector, and how did they work together with the other sectors, and just have dialogue about that. See which ones, see if we could find some tipping points in each of the sectors. See if we could network the sector solutions and create synergies between sectors. And so out of the Conscious Linguistics group, Conscious Cafe, of which the Conscious Linguistics group was one of the groups that got formed, we had a Gene Keys and Human Design group that would get together, and not only would we look at how deep this stuff goes, but we decided to play a game of what would a civilization on Earth, what would a relationship on Earth look like if all the beings were operating as their cities, as their illuminations. The thing is, we have all 64. Some are just encoded a little easier for us to envision. But to get that to occur, where what would that look like if everyone was operating from their cities instead of from their shadows, or even from their gifts? What type of game would that be? What type of co-creative game would that be? What type of ethic would be involved when we realize it's one consciousness and all the minds are working in a synarchy? All the minds are working in harmony with all that is. What would that look like? And yeah, you could go create another world. There's no limit to what types of worlds we can create. But this one's really a beautiful challenge. It's got some beautiful dynamics. We have a lot of help from other dimensions going on right now. And it's like, this doesn't turn into another Atlantis. We don't need another reset. We've already been there, done that. Why repeat history? It's not necessary. And I see this actually happening. I'm like, when people ask me how I'm doing these days, I say, I'm still obnoxiously optimistic, but I'll get better. And especially if you do too.
Right. So what does it look like where we're all in this illuminated state of our innate, natural, beautiful human embodiment, light bodies? Like what it would be like if I am living in bliss? I think like it would be a little embarrassing, like that, like definitely like growing up, I tried to hide that, that I was a trans kid, and I found like myself immersed in reality and in nature, and I would very easily, my feathers would get ruffled if I was in an uncomfortable place. And then being Dutch American, I would be very blunt about my dissatisfaction or annoyance, rather than so I had a hard time navigating all of that, and found myself stuck in these places that weren't working for me. But now I feel like we're coming to the next level, and I think that these teachings and these like the Gene Keys can really help people come into the like, oh wow, that's actually what I want, and what this is the navigation point to, like you were speaking earlier about changing your childhood experience. Some people call that matrix re-imprinting, regression. So basically you go back and you change the situation. And one thing that I've done in that, and I've done it with alchemical hypnosis, and then transformative visualization and body talk, and I'm going through these and ayahuasca, peyote, all these different experiences. And what I found I had to do was be my higher self, or my own parent, rather than you know, or believing that there were these energies, these humans on Earth who wanted good for me, like, because I hadn't really experienced that embodiment. I was afraid of everyone. I thought that the people were out to get me on the undercurrents, you know, of you know what was really happening inside of me. So I would approach the world like that, and then strange things would happen, and it would be dissatisfying rather than blissful. So what I ended up doing before I made Awaken Dream Synergy is you know, surfing the web, looking for people that I really believed in, Jason Silva being one of the people that really inspired me to be like, hey, you know, life can be great. I was like, that's what I want to be like that guy. And what's interesting is he and I are both similar in that we're in the Mayan astrology, we're both blue lunar storms. So that means we're like, you know, we're really like out there. And so he was this inspiration of someone who just spoke his storm and let it go. Lightning, thunder, rain nourished the people and the universe and nourished me. And so, and that reminded, and then I met a few other people here in Tulum, like that were just really beautifully embodied and living a fun life. Whereas in Northern California, there was a lot of, you know, what I was calling negative activism, where people were anti this and anti that, and I was just trying to get away from that because that just seems to be one of the streams of being in the activist world and or the artist world, and it wasn't serving me, and I was living that, and it was very dissatisfaction. So finding, like for me, finding that bliss and then connecting that with and feeling safe. So I feel like if we were all living in our illumination, then I would be able to feel safe in multiple groups and not have to shut my doors to a lot of people. But at the moment, I've decided that I have to shut my doors because I don't feel safe in a lot of places. And as a woman, you know, being in bliss, that can be very unsafe because we're being objectified as a sex object or as a thing to be used and things like that. So and that was my history as well of so I was very like boo-hoo, how could reality do that to me? I'm this human being that wants a beautiful life for the world, and so that was getting away from that dissatisfaction helped me create healthy boundaries and be in alignment more with what my truth and what I came here to be. So I would hope that more people would have that so that we could create this tensegrity of a new reality, a new paradigm shift. And that's where also we can create these vision quests of group social quantum change vision quests. And that's where Awaken Dream Earth and Synergy came. Is we have Mohan with a coherence device that reads your facial heat and gives your HRV, your heart rate variability, and then how that works with the Global Coherence Initiative and Heart Math, and how we're this magnetic. We create the magnetic realm of our hearts, and our hearts beat in sync with each other. So if someone's in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, then whoever is like the alpha energy kind of takes over whatever that scene is, or that energy, or that group, or that arena. But when we get into the ability of, no matter what situation we're in, to get back into coherence and be in more and more practice with that, and practice, of course, in safe places, so then you can then bring it into a new reality. That's what I had to do. I'm not willing to go into the uncomfortable places because I still get ungrounded. So yeah, so where we can create these safe places where people can come into their light, into their vitality, and then imagine a world where we're in our light and getting to know what our offering is in that. That's really, can you speak a little bit about the dynamic equilibrium that you were speaking about yesterday? My internet's been going a little bit in and out, so I haven't actually been hearing everything, but that would be Tulum, Mexico, and I'm not willing to go to a cafe at the moment where it's super noisy. But I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, beautiful. I would love to transition from what you were just saying, though, about the safe space and considering what the what that that world of synarchy, how safe is the synarchy? Well, it's perfectly safe, because everything's in harmony with everything that is. So when you look at the world that way, for example, what does your relationship with nature look like? So you found a beautiful stretch of beach. There's nothing but the most gorgeous sunset you've ever seen. And do you feel safe? Do you feel in beautiful relationship with that sunset and the beauty around you? Do you feel yourself part of that beauty? Do you feel safe? It's like this, all my relations, that beautiful aspect of course, we're all connected. And if we stop judging each other, we create more of a safe space. The beautiful channeling has become quite a thing, and it's totally legitimate because it's just channeling from other dimensions. It's just a feed through a translation of dimension, and many amazing insights have happened because of it. Well, there was an artist named Glenda Green that had an experience where she was asked, it was a marvelous portrait artist. She was asked to do a portrait of Jesus. And she immediately refused, saying, no, she really only likes to do live portraits, right? So she can get a sense of the qualities of somebody sitting with her. And yeah, I can't remember the time that it took, but all of a sudden she had this light kind of come into her, third eye, and all of a sudden she was visualizing this actual human that was her idyllic representation of Jesus. And they continued to have a dialogue for many months and composed a book of that channeling, or that transmission, live transmission, called Love Without End. And it's really hard to fathom if someone was not channeling some other dimension that they could write what she wrote. There was so much keen, compressed, simplified insight in that book. One of the things was judgment was the original sin because it created other. When we start looking at discernment instead of judgment, where we don't say, my view is separate from yours, my view is different than yours, and it doesn't work together. I'm judging yours as being too different. I would have done it differently if I were you, kind of separation. Discernment allows us to bridge between perspectives, and that's the only way we create synergy or harmony between differing perspectives. And that makes so much sense. What's what we practiced at the Conscious Cafe in Ann Arbor was no judgment. Stop. I remember one woman who had really had some traumatic experiences recently, was really struggling. And she'd heard about the cafe and she came and she was fairly stressed. And I said, okay, the rule here is no judgment. So just wander around from table to table and listen for a while. And you don't have to contribute. Just listen for a while and see what might resonate with you. It was not 20 minutes later, she comes running up to me and says, they're talking about aliens over there. They're talking about aliens. I've never seen that in public. This is wonderful. And of course, that was our SSE group, the Society of Scientific Exploration, which frequently does talk about contact and multidimensional beings. But I bring in this because the relationships that we see are the safe space. So start with nature. First of all, you can trust nature. Nature has never lied to you. Nature doesn't deceive you. And envision how beautiful that relationship is that you have with nature. And just bathe. Do some forest bathing or some jungle bathing where you are, and just feel how in harmony it is. You mentioned dynamic equilibrium. Well, that's nature's pattern. Nature tries consistently to find a dynamic equilibrium between inner and outer, between individuals, between conditions. It's always striving for a dynamic equilibrium, not a static equilibrium, not a balanced equation. Dynamic equilibrium, so it evolves, so it finds synergies, so it finds growth, expansion. So that's what nature's doing. I'd like to bring up a prime example of dynamic equilibrium. The purpose of viruses. What is their role in nature? What is their role in that relationship? How are they contributing to a dynamic equilibrium? Well, that's their whole purpose. They'll say, okay, you have these genetics, you have these conditions in this human body and in other bodies, but there's an external condition that is out of equilibrium with what you have internally. So it captures some of that information from the environment, pollutants and other things, and brings that into the body and has a genetic update. That's part of, hey, this pollution is out here, it needs to be updated. So like it goes from a bacteria that creates a virus. Viruses don't create themselves. They're generated by how a bacteria or other elements are dealing with a condition that's out of dynamic equilibrium. And so they take that genetic information and then they pass it on to other species to help update their genetics. If it weren't for viruses, as one of the Grail knights, Dr. Zach Bush would say, if it weren't for viruses, humans would still be laying eggs. A retrovirus created a placenta, which allowed for live birth. And the evolution of humanity has been greatly informed by viruses. And we couldn't have evolved without them, at least biologically. We might have jumped to energy bodies or light bodies. Yeah, that might have happened too. And we have made leaps in biology. But we've got others coming up right now because, yeah, the environment is getting out of balance, out of a dynamic equilibrium with humans. But you'll see with the latest virus, not everyone got ill, even when they were exposed to it. My immune system is in such good shape that I was exposed at least a dozen times to people who were definitely contagious and had absolutely no symptoms. But I've been following Zach Bush's energy protocol of, I'll put a plug in for him here, Ion Gut Health, or Ion Biome. Ion, in his case, stands for Intelligence of Nature. It's based on a microbiome that's 60 million years old. And it has such rich features that your body really becomes immune to most of these disturbances that are happening in our environment. Now, that's not covering all the psychological aspects of consciousness being fundamental, biology being derivative. But when you start to feel how it works and start to see how it works, and you listen to the science on it, my gosh, your belief system just went off the charts. And that helps. And there's no question. I think all illness is based on an interpretation of experience. And in some cases, a misinterpretation of experience.
So like the placebo or the nocebo effect?
That's right.
And biology being, as you said before, biology being a derivative of consciousness.
That's right.
Please deepen a little bit about that, because that's what technology of self is about, is how we are the technology.
That's
so
right.
What is this experience? What is this consciousness? How is our biology a derivative of this? How, as you were saying, does this belief system change what we produce within ourselves and within our connection in our society, our tribe?
It does. And just the idea of the placebo, do you realize that it is the most studied aspect of health on planet Earth? It's part of so many studies, more than any other drug, medicine, or treatment. Placebo gets in there based on the model that has actually, I think, failed us. It's come up with some brilliant ideas for emergency mending, mechanical mending. Sometimes the hubris of genetic manipulation, when you don't know what all the relationships are, is one of the hazards that are creating a need for evolution, because when you keep throwing a spanner in the works of how 7 octillion atoms in a human body can be operating together in some form of coherent beauty. And we keep trying to disrupt all of those atoms and molecules and relationships, and we don't even notice that we're outnumbered so much by the biology of microbes and bacteria and parasites. And I think I did a calculation between the fungi and the bacteria and the parasites and other elements that have actual genetics, and did a count. And this doesn't even count the 1.5 quadrillion viruses that you have in your body right now. I'm not even counting those because they're not counting as genetics, but you have so many more genetics than you do human genetics, human cells. You may have 70 trillion human cells, but you're outnumbered so much. I think I did a calculation based on latest numbers. I think we're only 0.023% human. And to not recognize that relationship and not honor that relationship of all of those things working toward a dynamic equilibrium on our behalf. Just such a beautiful community. And when we keep breaking that and isolating this and isolating that, I love what Zach Bush says about, you know, when a potential cancer cell gets isolated, it knows wait a minute, I don't have access to the resources I need to heal. I can't even send for a stem cell to regenerate. I'm going to have to multiply. I'm going to have to go into survival mode and start replicating uncontrollably. And that's what cancer is. And it only happens at a certain phase of coherence, right? When the coherence of the human body goes down to a certain level, something else Zach uses in his clinic, it's called a phase angle test, and it measures kind of the communication across membranes, right? It kind of shows how the cell can communicate, how well can the cells communicate. It's called a phase angle. And if it gets to about, if it's at 11, 12, 13 on the phase angle, you're practically immune from almost everything. Your body works so well. It says, nope, don't need that. Yep, I could use that. Nope, don't need that. The membrane of a cell is the most regulated thing in the human body. Why something gets in, why something doesn't get in. And we're talking energetics here too. We're not talking just structure or chemistry. We're talking the energetic fields of all of these things. But if you get down to 5, like 4 to 5 on the phase angle test, that's where cancers happen. And death occurs at 3.5 on the phase angle test. So when we see isolation or separation sickness, as Charles Eisenstein would call it, that's cancer in the biological form.
Yeah, they say that cancer is the most lonely cell in the body.
That's right.
And it's actually a cell that doesn't die, and most cells go through natural apoptosis and death.
Yep. That's right.
And also, like, that's interesting with Zach Bush, because I'm learning a lot about cellular respiration, and the electron exchange and the electrons outside and the inside, and then also the different gates of the different minerals and waters that come in. Water being 72% of our body, and if there's no amperage of the cell, like, that's where the cancer is. So I would love to look a little bit more into Zach Bush's thing. So, like, the lower the amperage, the more cancer, and the higher the amperage, the more likely that the cell is going to be in a pulse of releasing toxins and bringing in oxygen and nutrients, releasing CO2 and toxins and bringing in oxygen and nutrients. And that's where breath work, visioning the light work and things like this. There's a lot of it goes into quantum physics. It goes into different from biology to electromagnetics to quantum physics. And it's very interesting when we think about all the different levels that we can access our interface of mind or in our consciousness, and that we aren't just Newtonian physics of objects interacting with objects. And I remember reading about or hearing about how there was 2 different streams of thought when Newtonian physics became big. Is also metaphysics, which is what's beyond this reality. And Newtonian physics won, the philosophy of mind of the time, and it became a whole new, we created the multiple industrial complexes of, creating things, creating objects, creating cars and trains and vehicles, and which is kind of like an extension or an augmented reality of what humanity already is. So we're already augmented reality. We're already cyborg-ish with our telephones and our computers and our our cars and our planes and things like that. So where do you think that can go? And what is the technology of self and this embodiment that we can go with the meta consciousness and looking at the multiple dimensions of our reality and how to evolve?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that. And the beauty of this evolution, it's like the metaphysics or multi-dimensional aspect of these realities. What drives or pulls evolution, if not metaphysics, if not the next dimensions? It kind of pulls the layers out. Like astrologically speaking, right now there's the great attractor that's moving and kind of taking a lot of I think it's collecting a lot of shadow and pulling it out of the Earth's sphere, that allows for greater awakening, greater awareness, greater perception. All kinds of fun energies happening, subtle energies, which in Newtonian physics, we ended up with the religion of scientism, where objective, peer-reviewed science, proof of replication, evidence, physical evidence, and that could be repeated. Now, what does that do for intuition? Or creating something outside of that sphere? What, you know, where is imagination in that exploration? What perceives the non-physical phenomena that Nikola Tesla was talking about? There's a beautiful scene from the movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey, and it's a beautiful film. I really would love to see more people watch that. But there's this beautiful scene where Jodie Foster plays the scientist that's got turned on to astronomy and the stars by her father, you know, telescope, and identifying all of these stars. And she just got so enamored and inspired by, there must be life out there, right? So, but then her father dies when she's still quite young. And later in the film, she gets denied a trip after discovering aliens, you know, or other world civilization. She gets denied going on this trip because they ask her a question saying, "Do you believe in God?" And as a scientist, she says, I really need more evidence. But then this Matthew McConaughey character says, did you love your father? And she thinks about it for just not even a second. And he says, yes, of course. He says, prove it. And that's where I think science has gotten so objectified, so stuck in objects. When I listen to Einstein talk about trying to objectively solve a problem, 99 times come up with nothing, and then go swim in silence, and the truth just comes to him. That form of intuition, and I want to put one more quote in this category from Gene Key 57, which includes the gift of intuition and the city of clarity. Richard describes gene key 57 as the simplest way to attune to the higher realms is to put imagination in service to intuition. If you contemplate that for a little while, and your intuition starts to tell you something of subtle energy, of subtle perception, your intuition gives you a channel into something, and you can fill it with imagination, because that's the language that pervades all dimensions. What's the limit on imagination again? I forget. Who set the limit on imagination? I need a little help, right? That's what science really thrives on, but it doesn't validate it with it. It says, no, we got to prove it. We got to do this and this and this and this and this and replicate it. And we get to the lowest common denominator of objective reality in this dimension. Not this dimension, this dimension. It's held back innovation that could have accelerated even faster. It's not that it's not technology being kind of a branch of science hasn't evolved, but you ask about this being the technology. This is the technology. There's no question about it. I'll talk all day long about artificial general intelligence still missing imagination, still missing unconditional love. You can program it, try to program it, but you're just mimicking it. You don't have the out-of-body experience. You don't have a sensor on that side of the galaxy perceiving that side of the galaxy, even though consciousness can do that. There is no limit on consciousness. All of this is within consciousness. So we're the technology.
We are. And so Einstein also used the dream world to come up with his answers. He would ask his dreams before he went to sleep, and he also played with sleep. He didn't have a regular 8-hour sleep schedule. He would do 4 and 4 or 2 and 2, like naps. And he played with this. He played with his own consciousness, his own interface, and that actually helped him come up with the answers. He would actually ask his dreams to give him the answer, and he would have the answer for the formulas. And he was very much into imagination, and he used his intuition, and so did Tesla. So, and these are some of the most influential people in our time. So it's all about the experience, and that's where the times of the past that we're now coming out of, it forgot the experience. It forgot the personal experience. It forgot justifying and allowing people to speak the diversity of their own experience and how it is to be that. Because so we lost the communication of the conscious linguistics of our personal experience. How do we speak about what this is? Do we really only have 6 senses, or do we have echolocation, proprioception? How do we find our equilibrium? How can we sense our magnetoreception, electroreception? Yes, I can sense that, but when I spoke about that in the early days, people said that wasn't possible. But now with the internet and neuroscience and PubMed, there's so many different discoveries happening, so many people going to school, doing these tests. And so science is actually helping us prove that we are multidimensional, that we are metaphysics. So it's really exciting for people like me who have always been surfing the dream realm and being able to say, you know what, it's real. And so that's where Awaken Dream Synergy and Awaken Dream Earth, this and technology of self, is helping, or has the drive or desire to help people wake up to the technology and the inner media beyond what we're told we're supposed to know, and that we have an internal knowing. And this is the coming into sovereign unity with self and harmonic interwoven connection with other, in that where we come alive in that the gift and the illumination, and rather than in some place where we're put into a box, which is actually like enslavement to an authority, which is the pyramidal kind of scheme, and then we're not in charge of our own system. And that's where the internet is really helping us be able to communicate person to person and have that decentralized sovereign reality of and being personally educate ourselves. So where ignorance is the lack of education and the lack of knowledge, the lack of being able to bridge multiple experiences into a new reality. This is where we're heading as a people. We're just becoming more smart, and we're creating the technologies that help us be able to evolve. So I'm really excited for these times with the, that we are globally weaving, and that we are creating games and coherent systems that we can find out what's really going on with our own selves, and what is this interface, this divine technology of self interface, that the media that we interweave with, and then the contracts, the smart contracts, where we come in and we have a kind of bond that we actually agree to, rather than a bond that we're told to be boxed into. And actually, I agree to being in bliss. So if you want to join me in that, then I welcome you in my sphere. But otherwise, why don't I just cut the cords and not have that bond anymore? Which is, the all suffering is attachment. So it's attachment to a bond that may or may not serve. I mean, given they talk about neutrality and equilibrium, and not being attached to the bliss and the lust, or the feel good thing too, because that can turn into narcissism. And so finding that balance of like, well, what is good for me, but what is good for all of us? What can I be for us? I love that quote. How can I be the best for us? How can I be me for we? Or that, I love that. And because then that way we're having those interactions that are in harmony, but finding that resonance point is a discovery. And I really believe we're in a deep, beautiful discovery in humanity. I would love to maybe close this out before 2 hours, but I'd love to hear a little bit more what you might want to say to close this. And then would you have a kind of exercise or meditation that we could do, we could take home with ourselves and practice?
Yeah, I could leave with a contemplation. I would just love to invite those that would like to learn a little bit more about conscious linguistics. Also, there's a method we're using to spiral this out into like a spiral fractal, where we get into a dialogue about what is conscious linguistics about, why, what are some of the angles we're taking. Can you think of some other ways to bridge dimensions with language, semantics, semiotics, and beyond telepathy, to help the evolution describe, define, envision, and manifest. So reach out to me, and we'll get you connected up with another. And then when we have two, we add a third and get in a flow state between three, and then the three working together for finding like beautiful questions. Then we add two more. We agree on which two more could we bring in that would create a kind of a cognitive synergy or cognitive vortex of here's how we can keep creating. And then after you've got five, you add three more. You follow the Fibonacci sequence to expand it. And at any time, it can break out and start another spiral and start another spiral. And it doesn't have to ever get more than 8. 5 is really a great number, I found. So did the Open Cafe, what was it called? The Open Cafe? Or it was one of the other cafe models that thought dialogue groups could not go beyond 5. David Bohm thought otherwise, and some of the Socratic dialogue can go beyond 5. But it's okay, whatever works for you to get in a collective flow state. I'd like to leave with just a contemplation, a very simple.
Before we do that, can you share how people would reach out to you? Because you're basically offering to start a spiral of interconnection where you can lead to kind of conscious cafe, little bohemian dialogue experiences. Is that what you're offering right now?
Well, this is specifically for conscious linguistics and coming up with the tools and beautiful questions that we can start to ask each other that help heal the shadows,
Right.
expose what's behind the shadows, to uncover our true nature. And that's the purpose of it, so that now we'll be experiencing these other dimensions more and more collectively. And we could add those to the, quantum social science changes in those dialogues that come, or those guided meditations that happen on a large scale.
So find you on Facebook, or find the
you can. Find me on Telegram. That would be the easiest right now. So go to t.me/axiom0, and I'll give the rest of my contact information.
Great. I'm going to add that right there.
There you go. Beautiful.
Beautiful. And so you're offering to share conscious linguistics spirals from 1 to 2 people to 3 to 4, inviting people into
to 5, then 8, right? To
okay.
Follow the Fibonacci sequence. It's a way to keep the energy expanding.
Right.
If it just goes incrementally, that's back to linear progressive. But when it starts to expand, we saw this at the Conscious Cafe, where we called them synergy tables, but it created a cognitive vortex, especially when it went to 8. When there were only 7 chairs and you saw 8 at a table, you knew that was a synergy table, because somebody had to stand or find another chair from another table to join that table, but they were just drawn to that vortex to contribute to that spiral that was happening. And
the Conscious Cafe was in Michigan, right?
Yeah, in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Right.
We used to host it in the common house of the community I live in, Sunward Co-housing. But since the pandemic lockdown and my world exploded in terms of connections all over the planet, I've joined another group that might be actually building a beautiful website that would help take the Conscious Cafe, make it quite replicable, and create a virtual world that's very simple to participate in, has the same kind of feel, that has audio proximity and so forth, so that you can overhear. Because that was one of the beautiful things about the cafe. You'd be sitting at a table and go, oh, what they're talking about. Okay, I feel the energy drawing me to that dialogue now. I'm going to get up and get a cup of chaga tea, and then I'm going to go over and join that table. Or some beautiful food that we were serving. We won't have that aspect of the cafe unless it's bring your own to the virtual meeting. But it's doable and expandable. And that's what I want to see, is how quickly it can expand.
Right. And Bohemian dialogue being being what again?
Bohemian dialogue is looking at it's like a Socratic dialogue also. Socratic dialogue not only asks good questions, but it moves in the direction of what works, right? And again, no judgment. in that dialogue. You just pick on something and you go, ah, what leap can I make from that? What can I see at the edge of what was just said? What's true about that that goes further? What dimension does that go into, right? And that's what the dialogue goes around, is always reaching for deeper truth, always reaching toward source. And without the judgment, you don't get that separation. You don't get that fractioning of reality.
So an expansive kind of experience, diversity and interweaving and bridging of information.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Yes. So thank you for everything that you've been sharing. I'm going to put a lot of the notes in. This will be on YouTube. Right now, we're just going unlisted, but I'll probably make it listed and share it with our groups so they can see and start doing more of these podcasts. So yeah, what was the piece that you wanted to leave us with? I just want to make sure that the information was there. So
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing this, Denise, as usual. I love your creations. They're just blissful. And
more and more so, I hope, especially
yes,
when I work with my voice speaking as well.
That's right. You're doing a beautiful job. So the a little contemplation is, how deep does this question go? And just sit with stillness with this question and see how deep it goes. What if God is awareness itself? What if source is simply awareness itself? Enjoy.
Wonderful. That's a beautiful question to contemplate in our meditations and in our momentum. What if source is awareness itself? Woo-hee. Not necessarily needing to answer that. I think we can all have our own experience, and that's where our intuition and our imagination can come forth. We all have our diversity of how we may answer that. I certainly have my own experiences in this, and but I'm not going to spoil it for others.
That's right.
So maybe I'll speak about it later. But whew, life is just utterly incredible. It's such a blessing and a blessing to be alive and to exist. And I really believe that we're coming into a time where we awaken to a consciousness of thriving, where we awaken to the awareness of the interface of this embodiment. What is the mind of me that interweaves with the mind of you? What are we as minds intermeshing in geometry? Will it be sacred geometry of, rays of energetic light and information that weave in a handshake, or a fist fight? I certainly prefer handshakes, bliss, joy, and I would really love to hear about more people awakening to the spaces that give them that potency feeling of, wow, not only is life itself amazing, but my life is amazing, and the life of those that I interweave and interconnect with is amazing. To me, that's a dream, and I believe that we're all dreaming this together, and we're becoming more and more lucid and awake to the dream. And in lucid dreaming, you can actually choose where you're going to go, choose your own adventure. Whereas in a nightmare, something might be happening to you and you might not think that you have the power or the potency to shift it. But as in all dreams, when you're sleeping at night, you can actually face the nightmare and say, you know what? You're funny, monster. And then the monster turns into a bubbling baby, and then you're going cookie cookie coo. And that could be what's going on with life. So this is a dream, like with a lot of the native lores of many different worlds and tribes and connected to land people and connected to the cosmos, is they actually found the dream time just as important and as potent, or even more potent than the waking time. And a lot of tribes would come together and they would speak about what did you dream the night before. And so, and that would give the chiefs, or the people, the wisdom keepers, understanding of where their culture is. So how are we dreaming a quantum reality in this entanglement? Are you thinking and feeling the same thing as me? Because I certainly know after the Awaken Dream Synergy and the pandemic that there's a lot of people who are working on creating a new reality that we actually love. And this is a momentum of Earth and of people. And that may be an evolution of consciousness. I certainly believe it is. And I believe that this awakening and this awareness of what this interface is doing, this technology of media, is it's just it's blissful.
Mm-hmm.
So
It is.
yeah, a lot of times with Awaken Dream Synergy and Awaken Dream Earth, we would do a meditation before, after, and now that this is turning into a video podcast, I am completely in control. So I would, and a lot of times I would ask people to do meditations, and I'm really grateful for a lot of their meditations. But right now it's just me and you. So did you want to leave with that question, or do you have a meditation, or shall I do the meditation just to kind of really quickly close this?
I'd love you to share your gifts. That would be beautiful, Denise.
Okay. Well, yes, the blissful gifts of coming into interweaving connection. Well, I've had the vision since I was very young of life on Earth being amazing and people being in love with life and interwoven and connected in beautiful ways. So I would love for us to imagine this together by closing our eyes and taking a deep breath into our hearts. Seeing the light energy of our hearts become more vivid, more awakened, more brilliant. Breathing into our hearts. And collecting any debris in our heart area and exhaling it out of our system, out of our plasma bubble, our cymatic sphere. And breathing in the light from tapping into unconditional love all around us, and breathing into our area, our sphere, into our hearts. Allowing the light to grow, become more vivid and brilliant. Holding the breath, feeling our bodies. Collecting anything that doesn't serve, and releasing it out of our bodies. Imagining that every breath and every heart pulse, that all of our cells are pulsing with us. And that when we bring oxygen, imagination of light energy, love, unconditional love into our cells, we're creating an environment that nourishes the cells and creates an epigenetic potential where we may choose life or something else. Let's create the dream life. So what is it that you imagine in your dream life right now? Breathing that into your body from the infinite field of potential of all there could be. And holding it, feeling it pulse through your body. And then humming that through in beautiful joy. And seeing how the pulse of your heart light is magnetic and surrounds you and connects with other hearts around the world. And that we're woven with the beautiful hearts within ourselves, with the hearts within others. And that when we connect to that heart, that is the sacred contract, the bond, the sacred smart etheric contract of interweaving in a way that we love. So remember to feel and see your heart, know what you came here for, envision the dream, and help ignite and support that in others. Thank you for your offering. Thank you for your life. Thank you for your existence, your mind interface, and your conscious evolution, your awakening to the truth of you. Thank you. All right.
So much gratitude, Denise. Thank you. Unconditional love.
It's here. It's all around. Just bring it in. It's
That's right.
tap into the source
That's
and
right.
be the source. Yep.
Yeah, you could substitute unconditional love for awareness in that concept too. They're both names for the same thing. Infinite is the idea. The finite is what we experience.
And funneling the infinite potential into this interface of form, life, movement, creation, animate it with what we love.
I liked another quote from Love Without End. Life is love in action.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Agree. Take care,
Life
my friend.
is love in action. So wonderful to see you again, Mark, and I hope to have you here more often, and also more Awaken Dream Synergizers. You'll be welcome to join. Awaken Dream Earth is now a video podcast, and technology of self is one of the paradigms, so one of the creations. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Let's just end the broadcast and go in the backstage.
Oh, okay.